Professor Tao talking about the Mandela effect. The Mandela effect is something that's very real. It's a phenomenon globally, and it's something that I've been noticing for 5 or 6 weeks now. Loss of memory, thinking that I thought something was a certain way and it not being that way. Thought that I had a conversation with a particular individual about something, and it turned out that it was someone completely different that I had the conversation with. There's a lot of things on the internet at the moment about the assassination of John F. Kennedy, which is something that I've always been very interested in, and fairly shocked to witness that it could potentially have been Jackie Kennedy. Now, the explanation behind the Mandela effect is very scientific, because creation's thinking within that being itself, in terms of Vedanta, in how the Indian Empire, the ancient Indian masters, very clearly stated that we are now in illusion, and we are vessels, we are a brain, but also there's an element of thought. In cloning, a clone can be programmed like a robot, but our very thinking is a construct that's not only part of our biology, but is a construct to the environment of creation, the earth, and the actual universe itself. So this is about the convergence of timelines, and the construct of time and the construct of energy, and also how we are tied into everything. A timeline is something that has to do with synchronicities, and our reality itself, if you look back and imagine things 10 years ago, or some people have often said, oh, it was like a different world or a different time when we were younger, reality was completely different. So we've got to question, what is reality and what is illusion? How our very thinking changes on a daily basis, and how some of this is being affected by mind control. You've all seen the grids in the sky, the grids of clouds. Well, that's very much to do with mind control and clouds themselves. The movement of clouds affects our very thinking. Some of it's an experiment, some of it's very universal, that there is a convergence of timelines, and I think that there's more than 2 timelines. Everything has 2 elements to it. If we look at night and day, the left and the right side of the brain, the masculine and the feminine, there's always 2. So I very much agree that there could be a symbiosis here of a parallel existence or a parallel universe. But from that, like we see in quantum science, there could be, a 3rd element or even a 4th element of time, and how different scenarios and sequences of events change things. There was a fascinating program done that was actually canned. It didn't make the 2nd series, called Flash Forward, and Flash Forward was all about synchronicities and timelines, and something that was very specific in that program was the year 2016, because it was a case of this event that had occurred across the planet had knocked everybody unconscious, and it was all to do with the conscious mind, and it was all to do with synchronicities and how certain sequences of events were affecting other people, and sequences of events were coming together and aligning. So it was all to do with convergence, but how our very consciousness was connected to the planet. So the Mandela effect, personally, I think is something that's very real. We're going to see in the coming months other things that are going to pretty much shock us, because our reality itself is being questioned. We are all waking up. This is part of it, and these types of things in terms of timelines, even sequences of events in our own lives, allow us to question things and question reality, and walk further towards the light and the truth. But this is something that's fascinating at the minute. I've personally found that there's been lots of things happening that I can't quite explain. And there is obviously there's different energies around us. There's dark energy and there's good energy. This is all something that's obviously affecting the very solar system that we are in, and this is something potentially that's playing out from a high dimension, that other realities are going to converge and come through, and we might even start seeing these realities. It's very significant that people, how I've mentioned before in my audiobook, which talks about spirituality, we've talked about the mind and creation's thinking and the very imagination, how that's a construct of the future of this reality, that when we see something and imagine something, it's obviously a connection that we make to something that's there. Could it be a parallel existence? Could it be another reality? Or could it be even from another dimension? There's been very eccentric people in the past who have seen things that weren't in this timeline or weren't in this reality or dimension, but they've been very specifically seen them, even things along the lines of time travel. And if we look at chronovision and things like that, where people have gone back using chronovision, the case of Andrew Basiago, when they looked at history using chronovision and they could access particular timelines. There's been also very good testimony from Dan Burish, who was one of the guys that interacted with higher beings, extraterrestrial beings, and they were able to look at different events and different timelines. So I think this is very interesting. The movie Inception itself was something that fascinated me, because Inception almost leans towards this type of thing, and this is something that's very Indian, because the creation's thinking, Vishnu's thinking, Vishnu is having a materialistic dream. This reality is invested in illusion and Maya, and when that third eye itself opens, this reality ends just as we perceiving it, as a cosmos and around Earth and stars in the solar system, and that's all being projected into our very high thinking and awareness. But this itself, I've always said it, that this itself isn't real. None of this is really here. This is just almost like the light that we see from the stars, that's taken thousands and thousands of years to get to us, but we can still see that light. This is sort of like the residual effect of consciousness, and consciousness that's transcending from the dark and going further towards the light as the very age is changing. So there's a very specific pivotal point within the age of Kali Yuga, which is the dark age. The wheel is turning and we're going towards the light, and obviously there's going to be dimensional changes, and there's also going to be changes in timelines. Beings that are within fourth and fifth density, a high density or high dimension, will become visible, and whatever they are doing in terms of manipulating things, manipulating this reality, how this reality is being affected from the high dimensions, that's something that might start become apparent to people going forward.